What do 50 of the most popular melodies ever written have in common? It turns out there's one connecting X factor. And after listening to over 50 of the most famous ever melodies, I saw it again and again and again. So in this video, we're going to explore what that one secret X factor is, what it means for your music, and I'll give you one simple hack for how you can harness it to create insanely catchy melodies. First though, I want to tell you about our brand new updated course, Music Theory for Producers 2. Over 8,000 students have been through the original version and it's helped them get signed to labels such as Spinnin' Records, Armada and Unity, and many, many more. It's now completely redone and twice as effective, so you can check it out below this video. But first, we need to quickly go back to basics and understand a little bit of music theory, because the answer to this problem wasn't what I expected. So a melody consists of two parts. First is the rhythm, which is to say where the melody notes land in relationship to your beats. And second, the pitch of each note of the melody, which is pretty self-explanatory. So initially, I thought the X factor lay in one of these two things. That is to say, are there certain rhythms that catchy melodies are hitting that normal melodies just don't? Or are they using specific notes that non-catchy melodies just don't use? It makes sense, right? If they're the only two parts of a melody, it has to be one of those things, right? Turns out, it was neither of those things. Let me explain. We'll look at a couple of examples to help. Oh, quick side note, if you work out what the X factor is whilst we're looking at these examples, let me know in the comments below. Training your analysis and listening skills is one of the best things you can do as a musician. Okay, track number one, not one of my favorite tracks, but it has got an undeniably catchy melody. So I've drawn in the MIDI notes here for the melody and the chords, so let's just have a quick listen, and I've got them falling on a 4/4 beat with a kick drum. You'll all recognize that. So first thing, let's look at the rhythm of this melody. It's a very catchy melody, and why is that rhythmically? So we can see here we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the normal beat on the 4/4 where the kick drum hits, but we can see the melody notes are hitting 1/16 just before that beat. In fact, we've got a 16th here, then we skip 2 16ths, then we've got another one there, we skip 2 16ths, another one there, and then we revert back on the third beat. So let's have a listen to that again and hear what happens. Called syncopation. And let's listen to it if it didn't have that. So I'm just going to adjust these over here. I'm just moving all the notes to land either on the beat or halfway between the two beats. And now we've got this. It's just a bit, boring. So having that syncopation really adds to the groove. So there might be something in that. Now let's look at the pitches of the notes that he's using. Well, if these bottom notes here are kind of the bass note and the middle note of the chord, this top one is really the melody. This track is in C sharp minor, and we can see how many of these C sharp notes are being hit in that melody line. So if we delete these other notes, this is the melody on its own. It's like 4 notes in total, and most of it's just the root note of the track, and then the third in this scale, which is the E. That's it. And then you've got a couple of variations at the end. So it's simple, and it hits a lot of the root note of the track. So there could be something in that. But now let's look at the second track. Now the second track isn't one of the most popular melodies ever written, but it's a personal favorite of mine, so I wanted to look at it. And this is the melody. So with that in mind, let's look at the rhythm of this melody. Okay, so we've still got some of these notes hitting just before the beat, and that's giving it that syncopated feel again. So that's both melodies that have this. You'll also notice that, as with the first melody, this melody is repeating, and it's quite simple. Not only that, but we're hitting a lot of the same notes. Not so many of the root note, we're hitting a few though. But then we're just hitting the second position of the scale and then that third again. Again, there could be something in that. So what conclusion can we draw from these two examples? Well, both use pitches from the key that you're working in, but that's pretty much normal. All melodies do that. Okay, so what about rhythm? Well, both use what is known as syncopation. That is to say, the notes of the melody are playing a different rhythm to the underlying beat, which creates this really interesting groove. So that's the answer, right? Syncopation. Wrong. Because let's look at this third example. Now this third track will be recognized by everyone. So let's look at the melody within this. I'm going to hit scale mode, and we can see all of the notes in this melody are falling within that scale. So many family weddings with this tune. Now, in this instance, this melody is a lot more sustained. We don't really have that short syncopated rhythm that the other two did. Apart from here, and we can see this note's hitting just before the beat. And this one too is coming in a little bit before the beat, and that's giving it that syncopated feel, but mostly it's just not. They're just 3 beats long, 1 beat long, another 3 beats long, and then this one is 6.5 beats long. Anyway, now let's look at the pitch. If the track is in B major, there's only one of the root notes being hit there. We do, however, hit this third for a lot of this melody. So that again is something the other two melodies had in common. Okay, the pitches are all in key, so nothing unusual there, but the melody rhythm is hitting on the beat, which means it's not syncopated, which means my theory's wrong. At this point, I was about to give up. I'd listened to and analysed 50 different songs, and the secret X factor was still eluding me. So I decided it was time to take a break, have a cup of tea, and go for a walk in my local woods. Whilst out, I got deep. Bloody artists. So we've got this beautiful field with these lovely flowers, this lovely grass. You've got all these little insects crawling around, and the thing that makes them beautiful is that they all work together in harmony. I mean, if the flowers were on their own without the green to contrast them, it wouldn't look so nice, and vice versa. So it's all about the relationship. I think that's it. So with this realization in mind, I rushed back home, got back into the studio and started listening through these 50 tracks again. And like Jim Carrey in The Number 23, I started to see patterns everywhere. It turns out the idea that thinking syncopation was what made these melodies catchy was right.
What do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean?
Just not necessarily the syncopation of the melodies themselves. So let's get back into the door. So first, we don't need to do anything with Shape of You by Ed Sheeran because the melodies already got that syncopation built in. So let's go over to Lean On. Yes, we have some syncopation here. But if we look at the underlying chords as well, that has got a different syncopated rhythm, more like the Shape of You one. So now we've got 2 different syncopated rhythms playing over that standard 4/4 beat, and that gives it some real groove. So now let's hop over to the Dancing Queen and see if we can figure out where the syncopation's happening. Well, I've also worked out the chords and the bass line of this, so let's go into the chords and have a listen with the track playing. Straight away, we've got that same syncopated rhythm in the chords. 16th and then another 16th. We're skipping 2 16ths to that next chord, skipping 2 16ths to the next chord and the next one. So even though the melody doesn't have syncopation, the underlying chords do. Not only that, but if we look at the bass line as well, I've worked that out. And again, we've got this syncopation going on, as well as lots of the root note being hit. Nice. And it turns out this rhythmic relationship was present in every one of the 50 melodies I'd analysed. And another commonality which wasn't present in all of them, but it was in many, was heavy use of the 3rd position in the scale. So knowing all this, how can we use this to create simple and catchy melodies? Well, let's get on to that simple trick I promised you. I like to think of this as having a really recognisable logo. It should work in both colour and black and white. If the ratios or shapes are wrong, it's not going to be a good logo, and it's the same with melodies. So many times I've seen producers get rid of a melody that almost works. They've got the pitches that work with the chord progressions, it's all in the same key, and it sounds good, but it's the melody rhythm that they haven't got right. So here's the trick for how you can design your melody in black and white to make sure it's really strong, and then move into the color of the pitches. As we saw, syncopation is the key here, either of the melody notes themselves or the underlying drums, bass line, or chords. That's why we have to write a melody around something. And before you say sometimes melodies just come out of thin air, that's right, they do, but think about it. You always have an internal metronome playing subconsciously. So in that instance, you do actually already have a beat around which you're imagining the melody. Anyway, let's get back to the door. So the way that we're going to teach this is to look at a pre-existing melody, the kind of which I hear a lot from new producers. So let's have a listen to it. It's got the chords and the bass as well. So it's not bad, we're hitting the right notes, but it's just not very exciting, it's not very captivating or memorable. So let's break it down into both the rhythm and the pitch and see if we can see what the problem is. So if we transpose all of the notes of the melody just to the root note of the track, then we have got them all falling on the A because the track is in A minor natural. This allows our ears to focus just on the rhythm. In other words, listening to the melody in black and white. Let's have a listen. So it's not repeating itself and there's no syncopation, it's very on the grid, which gives the whole melody a robotic feel. And if we look at our bass, again, it's falling exactly on the beat. Exactly the same with the chords as well. And altogether this gives it a robotic feeling. So let's use what we've learnt today and improve this melody, rather than throwing away something that's almost good. So first, let's just tweak the rhythm slightly. What I'm doing is I'm adding some syncopation by moving some of these notes just before the beat, and I'm making sure I'm repeating the rhythm as well, just to make it more memorable and stick in people's heads. What I've also done is, for the bass and the chords, is just move over the start point of the second chord and the fourth chord, and the second bass note and the fourth bass note, to come in 1/8 before the beat. So altogether, we've got this effect, with the tweaked melody and the chords and the bass, with the melody just hitting the root note of the track still. And that's the hack. If you can get the melody sounding great on one note and dancing around your other elements, you know that you're going to end up with a really nice melody. Great, so now we've got the melody rhythm sounding good, let's move some of the pitches of these notes. If we go over to this version, we can see that I've moved some of the notes off the root of the track, and I've hit scale mode to make this easier, so I can just move the notes like this, up and down from the root of the track, which in this instance is A because the scale of the track is A minor natural. And what I'm also doing is I'm using a lot of these third positions, because if you remember, we saw those in a lot of the examples as well. So now we've got a combination of syncopated melody rhythm, and we're hitting a lot of the root notes and a lot of the third position notes. So let's have a listen now. And repetition. And a little flourish there at the end. And already, this is way more memorable than what we started out with. Nice. But the wild card I want to show you is that with the ABBA track, if we remember, the melody wasn't particularly syncopated. All the syncopation came from the other elements. We can do that too. So if we go to this last example of this melody, I've got it a lot more sustained and there isn't much syncopation in there. Let's have a listen to that, just with the kick drum. So there's syncopation there at the end, and we've got a couple of notes hitting an eighth before the beat. So there's a degree of syncopation in there. But really, all of this groove is going to come from the bass and the chords, which I've added a lot of syncopation to, just like in the ABBA track. And now let's listen to the difference. I love it! So to summarize the simple hack, try and write your melody all on the root note of the track, focusing just on the rhythm, your black and white mode. Then, using scale mode in your DAW, move the pitches of each of the notes until you've got something that sounds repetitive and memorable, using a lot of the root note of the track you're working in and also that third position. So using the X factor of syncopation in either the melody itself or the underlying elements is the key to a catchy melody, but only if you get the pitches of the notes right as well. And to do that, we have to go back to first principles and ask ourselves, what is a melody actually for? Well, an amazing melody should take our listeners on a journey and give them a truly emotional experience. Rhythm alone just ain't going to cut it. And there are 3 other factors that you have to nail if you want to create truly memorable and catchy melodies. Pitch being just one of those 3 factors. Now, I've put them together in this video here, which is going to show you how to craft 5 distinct emotional experiences with your melodies. But before you head over there, if you found this video useful, please subscribe to my channel and give it a like if you enjoyed it. It really helps me out and I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you at that next video where we're going to unlock emotions in your melodies.